Alright guys, and welcome back to the Saints video channel for Southampton content for our first match preview of the season. The new campaign is finally here. I'm incredibly excited for this one. I haven't felt this confident ahead of a new season for Saints for about 4 years now, when we went into the Europa League with Claude Puel. It's been a long time, but there's a lot of positivity around the club at the moment, and we've got our football back and we can finally see what Saints can do in this season, because I think we've been waiting for this one to start for a while now. Of course, it would be more exciting if we could go to the games, but at the moment it's still behind closed doors. But nonetheless, we've been given a decent chance on paper to end our barren opening day form with a trip to Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park. But before we get into it, a massive thank you to the guys over at Pitch Sport. They are sponsoring this video. They are our new partner for the brand new season. It is the app that you need to be downloading to keep up with all your football scores and results throughout the season. You've got other features like fan time. You've also got a score prediction and lineup prediction feature that you can share around with your mates. So many features, and instead of me telling you about them all, I think you should go and download it to see for yourself. It is the app that you need to be using for the season. As well as that, make sure you've hit the subscribe button if you haven't yet already, with your notifications turned on so you don't miss a thing. We're on the road to 3,000 subscribers. Follow us on our socials as well. Right, let's get into it. Now, starting off with Saints, of course, it is a very odd scenario to have only a month and a half between the end of a season and the start of a new one, but that is the situation that we are in at the moment. The very odd scenario that we are still experiencing here in 2020. But I think it's a positive for Saints, you know, given the fact that we finished the season so strongly. There hasn't been much of a layoff, and I think we can go into this new season with similar form that we showed at the end of last season during the restart. Now, of course, when we're talking about the start of a new season, we discuss pre-season. This time it hasn't really seemed that there's been much action, or at least the club haven't reported it. There was a friendly against Swansea a couple of weeks ago. They won 7-1 in two 60-minute games, and it was sort of half of it was first team, half of it was under 23. So it was a bit odd, but of course 7-1 as a scoreline is very encouraging. But the club didn't announce that they were playing that game until it had been played. It was all very odd. Reportedly, we played Fulham and lost 2-1 on the weekend, but the club didn't mention that at all. The under-23s have had a few championship games. It's all been very quiet from the club, which is a little bit concerning, but nonetheless, I'm still very confident that we're going into this season as one of the fittest teams in the league. And of course, we're also in the middle of a transfer window. So far, I'm happy with the business. I'm a little bit annoyed that we haven't got that defensive midfielder in to replace Højbjerg yet. Of course, the season's starting on Saturday, but for a couple of games, I guess, with Romeo, that's satisfactory. He had a very good end to the season last year, so he's a good option. But if it comes to October 5th and we haven't signed a new midfielder, I will be quite livid, to be honest. But we've brought in Kyle Walker-Peters, absolutely vital after the excellent loan spell he had. We needed a right back. It was a no-brainer, really. And also adding to our defensive options in Mohamed Salisu. I think for £10.9 million, he's going to look like a real bargain. He's not going to be in the side just yet. I think it'll be a slow integration for him. Maybe play him in the cup at the start and see how he goes, and then slowly sort of introduce him to the league. But Stevens and Bednarek played so well at the end of the season. You know, they deserve their chance to keep playing. As well as that, we've got rid of a little bit of deadwood. Of course, Lamina and Reed have gone to Fulham, but I would like to see a few more players leave the club. I think we need to see Hoyt go. Obviously, Elyounoussi gone on loan. Potentially Gunn needs to go on loan. Some people calling for Vestergaard to be sold as well. I think maybe he's an option that we kind of need now. We'll have to see how it goes, but yeah, there are certainly outgoings that will be happening for the rest of the window. I'm pretty confident of that. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again, it is absolutely vital that we start this brand new season quickly. I can't remember I think it was 2014 the last time we had a quick start to a season. We really need to sort of pull our finger out and get going from the off. And I think with this short layoff period between the end of last season and the start of this one, we will do that. I'm pretty confident that we'll sort of replicate the form that we ended last season on at the start of this one, and very quickly we'll see ourselves push into a strong position in the Premier League. You know, our first run of games, around the first sort of 6, 7, 8, whatever, they're relatively kind, to be honest. I think we said this in the Premier League fixture announcement video that we made a couple of weeks ago. You know, starting off with Palace away, on paper that's a game that we do very well in. Spurs at home, last 2 seasons we've beaten them. At St Mary's, you know, going to West Brom, going to Burnley arguably as well, possibly that could be a winnable one. A trip to Chelsea is a bit difficult. Everton at home, traditionally that's a winnable one. You know, there are games in there at the start that, on paper that we've won before, and as a better team, you'd like to think that we can again pick up 3 points from those. But of course, our opening day form is absolutely horrendous. It's the worst in the league. We haven't won on the opening day of a Premier League season since 2013 with that 1-0 win away at West Brom. It's been draws and losses basically the entire time. So it'd be very, very refreshing to see a win on the opening day. And I think when it comes to fixtures that we could have gotten on paper, that not guaranteed wins, of course, but a fixture that we've done well in over the past couple of seasons. Palace away is definitely up there, winning there the last 3 visits, keeping clean sheets in all 3 of those games. We won 3-1 back in 2014-15 as well. Traditionally, we've got a good record at Palace, and I think if we're ever going to be ending this awful form on the opening day, this is one of the fixtures that you look at on paper and say, yeah, this would be a favourable one. But moving on to Crystal Palace, it's a bit of a concerning time as an outsider for them. If you look at their form during the restart last season, at the end, it was absolutely woeful. They were the worst team in the league. They lost 7 in a row. They won against Bournemouth, drew against Spurs, either side of those 7 consecutive defeats. And you worry that with the season starting so soon after the end of last, will they replicate similar form? However, it is a new season, and the additions of Eze and Ferguson from the Championship, 2 very highly rated young players, I think are great additions for them. They've done good business there, and of course they're ones to look out for on Saturday. But I did say in my Premier League predictions video that I am worried for Palace this year. I predicted them to finish 16th, but I hate to say it, I do like Palace as a club, but I wouldn't be surprised if they go down this year. I just think the tactics under Hodgson are a bit outdated now. It's stale. The squad's looking quite old. I don't think there's going to be much from Palace this year. However, that means absolutely nothing when it comes to the first game of the season. They could beat us in every single department and win comfortably on Saturday. We just don't know. It is the beginning of the season after all. But having a look at their pre-season, they've had more games than us and they've looked decent. They struggled a little bit in the last one, but I'm no expert on Palace, of course. So instead of me talking about them to you guys, I spoke with DR from Back of the Nest, a Crystal Palace fan channel, to see what's been going on at Palace, how he's feeling ahead of the season and ahead of the game on Saturday. Right then guys, it is time for the opposition preview, the first one of the season ahead of our game at Selhurst Park against Crystal Palace. I'm glad to say I've got DR from Back of the Nest, the Crystal Palace fan channel. Mate, first of all, how are you doing and how are you feeling ahead of the season as a whole?
Yeah, I'm doing well. The season as a whole is a bit of a scary thought because we've got Roy Hodgson as a manager, and last season we ended the season on an 8-game winless streak, lost 7 games in a row, which was, even by Palace's standards, quite amazing. And going into the season, it seems like it's going to be a transition season, which sounds weird to say after you've been in the Premier League for 7-8 seasons, but we've had a couple of transition seasons in between that time, and we're focusing on younger players. So it's going to be a season with low expectations for me because of the manager, Roy Hodgson. I just hope that he keeps us up, and then after the season, we go and get a new manager in.
When you say low expectation, what are we talking about with low expectations for Crystal Palace? Is that possibly relegation come the end of the season? Is it fighting relegation, or is it a sort of another mid-table finish around 13th, sort of 14th, 15th?
I would say to stay up. That's my expectation, just to stay up, because last season, I believe this squad can go forward with a different manager. It's not the most exciting squad, of course, but also it's not a bad squad that he only scored 31 goals in 38 games. I think the tactics are way too negative under Roy Hodgson. So if we just stay up next season and then bring a new manager in, then I'd be so happy with that. Because right now, it's a mess. Zaha wants to leave, but it seems like he's still going to stay at the club because no one is going and paying how much Palace want, which is around 50 to 80 million, something around that range. Not too sure nowadays what is that they want. But yeah, hopefully we stay up and we bring in these younger players that we've already got one in, and likes of Eze, and push on from there.
You talk about Eze, that leads me nicely on to my next question for you. Of course, we're midway through a transfer window that's so different. It's very difficult for the clubs to invest at the moment, and we still have another month almost. But how would you sum up your transfer business so far? And if you could strengthen one more position, which one would you choose?
So our transfer business so far has been relatively good. We've brought in Nathan Ferguson from West Brom, who was highly rated a fullback. We didn't replace Aaron Wan-Bissaka for 1 year, typical Palace. So we went into the season with Joe Wall. So Nathan Ferguson comes in at right back. And with the attacking player, as I said, 31 goals in 38 games in league. We just needed a creative player. And we brought in Eberici Eze from QPR, who looked like a decent decent prospect. Lots of clubs were after him as well. And it seemed like he's happy at Paris. He's also from South London. Played only 45 minutes of pre-season football. Looked brilliant with Zaha, but that's, of course, pre-season and only 45 minutes. But my expectation is that Michy Batshuayi will be joining Palace possibly before the Southampton game, and we desperately need a striker, so he'll be one to potentially look out for during the game, because that should be announced relatively soon. And hopefully another winger, another attacker, because as I said, we desperately need more players going forward. Wilfried Zaha can't be our only answer, and yes, we'll in Eze, but if he gets injured, God forbid, we haven't got anyone else to potentially create chances for Palace. But it seems like another attacking midfielder could be on his way to Palace in Bright Samuels from QPR. Seems like we're raiding QPR this summer. But yeah, overall, hopefully attacking players, because it seems like in defence and in midfield, we've got enough numbers there for the time being.
Yeah, well, going into the game on Saturday, of course, Southampton have a relatively good recent past their form at Selhurst Park. Are you nervous for the game? You know, what are your sort of overriding emotions going into the game a couple of days ahead of kickoff?
I'm a bit nervous due to the fact that during the pre-season, we were undefeated. We played 4 games against Millwall, Charlton, Oxford United, and also Brøndby. But I'm nervous because in our final game, the most challenging game, we actually struggled against Brøndby. And I think there's still lots to do over the next couple of weeks in terms of make sure the squad is back up to full fitness, playing the football that Roy Hodgson wants. So I'm a bit nervous of this game. It seems like it's coming a bit too soon for my liking. But overall, hopefully, as we talked about before, hopefully we get something out of the game, and Palace can at least go into the season with not as much negativity as we ended last season, because you don't want to lose this game. Trust me, if you're a Palace fan, if we lose this game, I can imagine things getting toxic as soon as that, because of how bad it was last season.
Okay, well, obviously, let's talk about the end of last season, because that's something that I was quite surprised about. You know, I was conscious of it, but I kind of forgot. And then obviously previewing this game, I reminded myself of how bad the form was. You know, what was that down to? Because it obviously looked bright and rosy at the start of the lockdown, beating Bournemouth 2-0 away, pretty solid performance. And then you go on and lose, was it 7 in a row, with ending it off with a draw against Spurs? You know, what was behind that? Because it was so poor.
Yeah, it was very poor. And I think it's going to sound harsh, but I think Roy Hodgson was behind that, because when you have a manager who says before games that when asked about his ambition for the rest of the season, he just said just to get through them. And if you got a manager that's having uninspiring comments before the game, then I guess that message is being sent to the players as well. So I can't really go out there and blame the players for not performing as well, because why would you if your manager doesn't want you to? So it's one of them things where I think we stayed up relatively safe, relatively well, and we didn't have any doubts of us going down. And Roy Hodgson just thought, you know what, let's just pull the socket, just let it end here, and let's just go through these games. And it was just absolutely horrendous watching as a Palace fan. We barely got any goals, lack of ambition. And that's why I think many Palace fans have just said enough is enough of Roy Hodgson, because even when we were losing games, even when we had zero chance of finishing in the top half or even getting relegated, he didn't change it about. And that's pretty much been the sum of Roy Hodgson since he's been at Palace. He has his favourites, he doesn't change it about. And you know what? That cost us towards the end of the season.
Just to wrap it up then, mate, first of all, who do you think is going to be the key man for Palace?
Of course, Wilfried Zaha, but if Eze does start, he's picked up a groin injury, I think last week in his first pre-season game. That's why he only played 45 minutes and also went out of the England under-21 squad. So I'm not too sure if he's fully fit for this game, but hopefully if he is fit enough to start, I think Eze would be one to watch out for, because you don't really know what to expect, because you can't go and watch old videos of Eze at Palace, because there isn't any, unless you watch the 45 minutes of him against Oxford. I think it was Charlton, not Oxford United. Charlton, where he played really well with Zaha. If Eze starts, I think he'll be my main man that you should watch out for. But of course, Wilfried Zaha, he looks like a different man in pre-season. Last season, he didn't have his greatest season, but he scored 3 out of 3 goals in the last 4 games in pre-season. And it seemed like he's going to have that more freedom going forward, because under last season, under Hodgson, he was just asked too much defensive duties and it hurt him massively. But it seemed like Hodgson may go back to unleashing Zaha and letting him play his football and doing what he does best.
Finally, mate, let's wrap it up with a score prediction. As you say, you're feeling a bit mixed about it, but do you think Palace can get a result here?
I think a draw would be good for Palace at this point. As I've said, you don't want to lose this game if you're Palace because of how everything ended last season and how the fan base is really against Roy Hodgson so far. So hopefully it's a 1-1 draw. As you said on our preview show, that you guys haven't won an opening game of the season. So hopefully that comes into our favour. Hopefully you don't win that game. And a draw will be a good result for both sides. You take a point, we take a point, and then we move on.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for coming on, mate. Of course, I'll leave his link in the description below. Do check out Back of Their Nest, great Palace channel. And yeah, may the best team win, I guess, on Saturday. Big thank you to DR for coming on. Really interesting stuff regarding Palace at the moment. Make sure you give Back of Their Nest a subscription. But on to my prediction now. I don't know if you've been able to tell from this video, but I'm relatively confident for this one. I'm confident that we can get over the line and win it. However, we've had some very favourable fixtures on match day 1 over the last couple of seasons, and we've just not shown up in any of them. There have been some very, very winnable games on paper that we've had on the opening day, and we just haven't shown up. You know, it really wouldn't surprise me if this ends a 1-1 draw. However, I'd like to think that it's different circumstances. You know, we are looking like a very, very strong side. I think Ralph obviously knows what he's doing now with the team. We know our best 11. We obviously finished last season so strong, and that was only a month and a half ago. I think we will win this one. I think it's going to be tight. I'd love to sit here and say it's going to be a 3-0 comfortable win for us, but it's just not going to be. So I'm going to go for a 2-1 win. I think we are going to win the game. We've got our internationals back, and they're all fit from how it sounds. So we've got Ings and Ward-Prowse who can be there. We know our best 11 now. And I do think we'll go and win this one. So I'm very excited for Saturday. If you are too, leave the video a like. If you haven't yet already, make sure you've hit the subscribe button with your notifications turned on. Follow us on all of our socials, and we'll see you tomorrow for our predicted lineup.